Pastor Ezekiel Adonai was a man of immense influence, one whose reputation preceded him throughout Lagos and beyond. His church, Holy Fire Ministries, was among the most prominent in the city. Thousands flocked to the church each Sunday, seeking spiritual nourishment, healing, and deliverance from the revered pastor. His charisma, combined with his eloquence and an apparent spiritual connection, drew in the lost, the broken, and the faithful. To the outside world, Pastor Ezekiel was a man of God, anointed and chosen to lead his flock toward salvation. But within the church's corridors, behind closed doors, a different story was unfolding, a story steeped in darkness and deception. Ezekiel had always been a man of ambition. From a young age, he had desired greatness, not just in the spiritual realm, but also in the eyes of men. His rise to fame within the Christian community was no accident. He knew how to captivate a crowd, how to deliver sermons that stirred emotions, and how to present himself as the embodiment of holiness. His congregation revered him, hanging on to his every word, believing in the miracles he performed, and trusting in the vision he claimed to have from God. Yet, for all his outward displays of piety, Ezekiel harbored a secret, a weakness he had struggled with for years, but never fully conquered. It started innocently enough, with casual conversations and friendly banter with some of the church's female members. But over time, these interactions grew more intimate, more personal, and eventually crossed the line into something far more sinful. One of the first to fall victim to Ezekiel's manipulations was Amara, a young woman in her mid-20s. Amara was strikingly beautiful, with a gentle spirit and a deep love for God. She had been attending Holy Fire Ministries for a little over a year, drawn by the powerful sermons and the sense of belonging she felt within the church community. Raised in a devout Christian home in Enugu, Amara moved to Lagos after completing her university education. Like many young people, she hoped to find a good job, settle down, and build a future in the bustling city. But Lagos was not kind to everyone, and after 2 years of job hunting, Amara was beginning to lose hope. One Sunday, after the service, Pastor Ezekiel approached her. His presence alone was enough to make her heart race. This was the man who spoke to God, the man who could see into the spiritual realm. "Sister Amara," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring, "the Lord has revealed something important to me about your life. There is greatness in you, but there are also obstacles that need to be removed. I want to help you overcome them, to break free from the chains that are holding you back." Amara was taken aback. Why would the pastor single her out? What could the Lord have shown him? "Thank you, Pastor," she replied, her voice tinged with a mix of excitement and anxiety. "I really appreciate your concern. Come to my office tomorrow at noon," Pastor Ezekiel continued, his tone warm and inviting. "We will pray together, and I will counsel you on how to navigate these challenges." The next day, Amara arrived at the church office, nervous but hopeful. She had never been to Pastor Ezekiel's office before, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as she walked through the lavishly decorated space. The office was a testament to the success of the church, with expensive furniture, a large mahogany desk, and a portrait of the pastor hanging on the wall, a reminder of the man who had built this empire. Pastor Ezekiel greeted her warmly, offering her a seat across from his desk. "Let us pray," he said, closing his eyes and raising his hands. Amara followed suit, bowing her head and clasping her hands together. The prayer started as she expected, fervent, passionate, and full of spiritual intensity. But as it went on, Amara began to feel a sense of unease. The pastor's hands, which had been resting on her shoulders as he prayed, started to move. First, they lingered longer than necessary. Then they began to slide down her back, touching her in ways that made her uncomfortable. Amara's eyes flew open, her heart pounding in her chest. What was happening? She had come here for spiritual guidance, not this. "Pastor, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. Pastor Ezekiel opened his eyes, his gaze steady and intense. "My daughter, don't be afraid," he replied, his voice low and persuasive. "This is part of the deliverance process. The Lord is using me to remove the spiritual blockages in your life. You must trust me." Amara's mind raced. She had heard stories, whispers among the women of the church, rumors about private prayer sessions that had crossed the line. But she had never believed them, never imagined that the man she admired so much could be capable of such a thing. Now, she was the one in the pastor's office, feeling his hands on her, hearing his voice telling her to trust him. "Pastor, I don't think this is right," she stammered, trying to pull away from his grasp. But Pastor Ezekiel was relentless. "Do you doubt the anointing of the Lord?" he asked, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Do you know who you are talking to? I am a man of God, chosen to lead this flock. If you reject me, you are rejecting the Lord's will. Do you want to bring a curse upon yourself?" Amara's legs felt like they were made of lead, her body frozen in place. She didn't know what to do. The fear of disobeying a man of God, of incurring the wrath of the Almighty, was overwhelming. But deep down, a small voice whispered that this was wrong, that she needed to get out. With a sudden burst of strength, Amara pushed herself up from the chair, knocking it over in her haste. "I'm sorry, Pastor, but I can't do this," she said, her voice shaky but resolute. She grabbed her bag and fled from the office, tears streaming down her face as she ran. Outside, the bright sunlight felt like a harsh spotlight on her shame. She had just walked out on the most powerful man in her church, a man revered by thousands. What had she done? Had she just thrown away her chance at spiritual deliverance? Or had she narrowly escaped a trap that others had fallen into? For days, Amara was consumed by guilt and confusion. She stopped attending church, too afraid and ashamed to show her face. The thought of what had almost happened haunted her, the memory of the pastor's hands on her, his voice telling her to trust him. But as the days turned into weeks, her fear began to turn into anger. How many other women had Pastor Ezekiel manipulated like this? How many more would he prey on if she stayed silent? Amara decided that she couldn't keep quiet. She had to do something, but she knew that exposing Pastor Ezekiel wouldn't be easy. He was powerful, respected, and had connections in high places. Who would believe her over him? Amara reached out to her closest friend, Chidinma Okoye, who was also a member of Holy Fire Ministries. Chidinma was a strong-willed woman, known for her outspokenness and her unwavering sense of justice. When Amara confided in her, Chidinma was horrified but not entirely surprised. "Amara, are you sure about this?" Chidinma asked, her voice full of concern. "This could ruin you. You know how people in this church worship Pastor Ezekiel. They'll say you're lying, trying to bring him down." "I know," Amara replied, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. "But I can't keep quiet. If I don't speak up, he'll continue to do this to other women. We have to stop him." Chidinma agreed to help, but they both knew they needed more than just Amara's word to take down a man as powerful as Pastor Ezekiel. They started discreetly gathering information, talking to other women in the church who might have had similar experiences. At first, most of the women were too scared to talk. Some flat out denied that anything inappropriate had ever happened, while others brushed off the rumors as baseless gossip. But slowly, a pattern began to emerge. Some women, emboldened by Amara's bravery, began to share their own stories. Stories of private prayer sessions that had gone too far, of the pastor's hands lingering where they shouldn't, of words whispered in the guise of spiritual guidance that left them feeling dirty and ashamed. As the stories piled up, Amara and Chidinma knew they had enough to take the next step. They decided to go public with their findings, knowing full well the storm that would follow. They recorded a video in which Amara detailed her encounter with Pastor Ezekiel and shared the testimonies of other women who had come forward. The video was raw, emotional, and unflinchingly honest. They knew that once it was out there would be no turning back. The video was uploaded anonymously to social media. Within hours, it went viral. The Christian community in Lagos was shaken to its core. People who had revered Pastor Ezekiel, who had seen him as a man of God, were now questioning everything. Was this the man they had trusted with their spiritual lives? How could he have done something so vile? The church leadership, caught off guard by the sudden scandal, was forced to act. They suspended Pastor Ezekiel and announced that an independent committee would be formed to investigate the allegations. But the damage was done. The once revered Pastor Ezekiel Adeniyi was now the subject of a national scandal. His reputation was in tatters, and the church he had built was on the brink of collapse. The media descended on Holy Fire Ministries like vultures, eager to pick apart the story of a fallen religious leader. News channels ran the story on a loop, while newspapers splashed his face across their front pages, the headlines screaming about the scandalous revelations. Amara's life was turned upside down. She received threats, harassment, and even bribes from people trying to silence her. Some members of the church, unable to believe that their beloved pastor could be guilty, accused her of lying, of trying to destroy the church out of jealousy or spite. But Amara stood firm. She had uncovered a darkness that needed to be brought to light, and no amount of intimidation would silence her. The investigation dragged on for months. Pastor Ezekiel, in a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation, denied all the allegations, claiming that he was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by those who envied his success. He hired a team of high-profile lawyers to defend him, and his supporters rallied around him, proclaiming his innocence. But the evidence was overwhelming. The testimonies from the women, combined with text messages, emails, and recordings, painted a damning picture of a man who had abused his power and betrayed the trust of those who had looked up to him. The independent committee, after a thorough investigation, found Pastor Ezekiel guilty of gross misconduct and abuse of power. He was stripped of his pastoral duties and removed from the church. The church leadership issued a public apology to the victims and promised to implement stricter guidelines to prevent such abuses in the future. But for Amara, the victory was bittersweet. She had exposed the truth, but at a great personal cost. Her faith had been shaken, and she struggled to find her place in the Christian community. She couldn't bring herself to return to Holy Fire Ministries, not after everything that had happened. The church, once her spiritual home, now felt tainted, a reminder of the betrayal she had suffered. Amara's life after the scandal was far from easy. The public nature of the case made it difficult for her to find peace. Everywhere she went, people recognized her, some offering support and others hurling insults. She had to leave Lagos, moving back to her family in Enugu to escape the constant scrutiny. But even there, the whispers followed her. Yet, amidst all the turmoil, Amara found strength in her faith. She turned to God in her darkest moments, seeking comfort and guidance. She knew that what she had done was right, that by speaking out, she had protected others from falling into the same trap. Slowly, she began to rebuild her life, finding solace in her family, her friends, and her faith. As for Pastor Ezekiel, his fall from grace was swift and brutal. Stripped of his title, his wealth, and his influence, he was left with nothing but the consequences of his actions. The church that had once worshipped him now shunned him, and the people who had once revered him now saw him for what he truly was. The media, once eager to glorify him, now turned him into a cautionary tale, a warning to others who might be tempted to abuse their power. But the story of Pastor Ezekiel Adeniyi was not over, for while he had fallen, there was still a long road ahead, one that would lead him through the valley of despair, but ultimately back into the light. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories of faith, transformation, and hope. Remember, no one is beyond redemption, and with God, all things are possible. Stay blessed and see you in the next video.